Business Disability Forum, creating a disability smart world together.
Hello and welcome to our second series of If You Don't Mind Me Asking, where we ask questions and explore lived experiences of people with disabilities. I'm here with my co-host Lucy and my name's Dan. Both still they happily work for Business Disability Forum. So hello Lucy.
Hi Dan, thanks for that. And obviously it's a pleasure to be back, and we've got another guest with us today, and we're delighted to be joined by Linda Pike from BT. Hello Linda.
Hello, good afternoon. Really lovely to catch up with you both today. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
No, fantastic. So I'm going to ask you one question, which is actually about 3 or 4 questions in one, but that's the way we do it sometimes. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you come from, and a little bit about the day job as well, that would be great, please, Linda.
Yeah, sure. I'm Linda Pike. I'm 50. I live in Colchester in North Essex. I grew up in Devon. I've lived abroad when I was younger, working and studying. But I was originally born in Essex, so I've kind of come full circle back to my roots, I guess you could say. I work for BT, but don't ask me about your broadband because I can't help you with that. I work in BT's global cybersecurity unit called BT Security. I'm a security bid project manager. So basically, my day job is working with our global customers, new customers, prospective customers, current customers, and I work with our salespeople who own the relationships with those customers, and I basically work with them to help them scope and put into delivery technical and cybersecurity solutions to keep their organizations, their customers and their data safe. It's a really exciting job. There's a lot of variety to it. No 2 days are really ever the same, and customer requirements are always changing. So there's a lot of variety for me, which I like. And there's a lot of sort of stakeholder management as well, and logical thinking. So it definitely keeps me on my toes.
Sounds like quite a busy one as well, Linda.
Yeah, very busy. Yeah, sometimes a bit too busy. I need to grow extra arms and keyboards some days, but in the main, it's okay.
And I know when we have met before and have a little conversation, haven't we, Linda, and shared, and I know that you have a number of conditions, don't you, that you're happy to share with our listeners and viewers today as part of this. And again, it's a long list. I could hold up the bit of paper with everything on almost, but could you just give us a bit of a insight into what life's like for you and what some of those conditions are like, or what it is that you experience?
I'd be more than happy to, Lucy. Well, my health conditions, disabilities are non-visible ones. I didn't have them from birth. I sort of came to them later in life, and there's a little bit of a sort of a sequence of events which happened with me. It all began back in 2009 when I contracted swine flu, along with I think the rest of the country at that particular time. However, the swine flu I had, unfortunately, it mutated into encephalitis. It made me really quite poorly, and I ended up being under the care of a neuro rehabilitation team in southwest London who were absolutely wonderful. I've recovered from the illness, I'm happy to say, but it did leave me with some permanent issues. The main one initially was a vestibular disorder, which is basically my inner ear and how I balance and how I orientate myself in life, as it were, was very badly affected. So I get balance problems, dizziness, vertigo, that kind of thing. And I don't get my balance information from my ears anymore. I get them through my eyes. So the result of that is, like I said, I'm very dizzy, but I also have a lot of sensitivity to strong lights, loud noises, that kind of thing. And I also get sort of cognitive issues. I can get very overloaded very easily, just because my brain is having to work differently now to process the balance and all the sort of information it has to do to keep me upright. And so I basically run out of juice quite quickly if I'm not careful. I have to pace myself. So working in a sort of busy environment, office environments, that kind of thing, long hours at computers, visual presentations can be quite difficult for me. And unfortunately, another thing which happened after I'd developed this sort of balance disorder, as it were, is that I became a bit wonky in how I walked, because everything was wonky for me. And unfortunately, as the years passed, I've developed some musculoskeletal issues because of the abnormal gait that my vertigo has caused me. I've had a series of orthopedic surgeries in the last few years. Touch wood, I haven't had one for about 4 years now, so let's keep it that way. And I'm partly bionic, which work don't mind, because they think I don't need holidays anymore. I can just have a bit of WD-40 and off I go, kind of thing. I have ongoing treatment for my musculoskeletal issues, physiotherapy, osteopathy, injections, and also medication. And I also have an auditory processing disorder, which is a neurodiverse condition that affects how my brain interprets sound. It's a bit like trying to listen to a telephone conversation when the line's really crackly and you're not quite catching every word, and you're thinking, have I heard that right? That's kind of how it is for me these days when I'm trying to listen and sort of join in with conversations. And this again was something which was caused by the encephalitis I had. Because before that I didn't have these issues. And lastly, but by no means least, the latest thing to join the party I have is hypothyroidism caused by Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune disease. And so basically that's quite a new diagnosis for me. I've been diagnosed about 2 years now, but that brings with it quite a raft of physical symptoms, which I have to deal with on a daily basis, primarily through medication. So like you said, Lucy, I've got quite a lot going on.
There's so many like different conditions that must have had to adapt to over the last sort of like 15 years or so. And it's so I'm really interested actually to know about how that would have affected you, sort of like each of those symptoms, and then how you're basically having to adapt to work and adapt your role, and how basically you've been able to do that. But I know there's also another reason that we were speaking was also because on top of those conditions as well, you sort of added menopause to the list as well. We just wondered how that's sort of, well, I suppose exacerbated those conditions, or added to, or, you know, in what way has that impacted all those conditions?
Well, yeah, menopause has sort of added an extra layer of, I guess, complexity to my sort of current situation. Firstly, because initially when I now know, sort of premenopausal, it was missed with my GP, because a lot of menopause symptoms are very similar to hypothyroidism symptoms that I have. So when my hypothyroidism took a downward turn, and my medication was increased quite dramatically, which made me feel awful, the GP thought that the increase in symptoms was because the hypothyroidism had got worse. We now know with hindsight that it was actually the start of going into perimenopause. And there's a lot of similar symptoms like fatigue. I know lots of people talk about that, weight gain, muscle aches, joint aches, not sleeping well, having sort of dry hair, losing your hair. I went through a period where I did start to lose my hair, and I've got a lot of thick hair, and I've never been in a position of worrying about losing my hair. And I think for women in particular, we place a lot of importance on our femininity with our hair. So that was quite upsetting. And also impaired memory. You know, people talk about brain fog, don't they? I have that anyway, partly through the hypothyroidism, partly because of the cognitive issues I sort of deal with on a day-to-day basis. So menopause just sort of ramped all of those symptoms up, and initially was missed. I'm happy to say, though, that by by being tenacious with my GP, and I think just listening to my body. I've been through quite a lot in the last few years, so I think I know my body quite well. I know when something's not right, and also being my own advocate with the GP. Finally, I got them to listen, and they did the appropriate hormone tests and said, yeah, you're actually in menopause. So it took me a little while to get there. I think it took about a year of going back and forth to the GP before I arrived at a conclusion. But it's definitely made things more difficult for me in the short term.
And I think those layers over the top of it, you're right in saying that you become the expert on your own conditions. You are the one constant. And although obviously medical experts are really important as part of that holistic thing, you know your own body, and you knew there wasn't something was a bit amiss, wasn't it? So, but it's about listening and really making sure that you push for that stuff. And that's not always easy, I don't think, is it? Especially if you have got any, the menopause brings all sorts of joys and delights, doesn't it? In terms of self-doubt, that brain fog and that lack of clarity, or it just so many different components. But having that confidence to speak out and push back a little bit, it's more difficult, I think. I mean, as if it's not complicated enough if you do have all those conditions as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Lucy. It definitely took me quite a few visits to my GP practice, and I spoke to quite a lot of different GPs, some of them male, some of them female. And I think one thing I would say is that I started to keep a diary of symptoms and how I was feeling, and to see if there was any correlation, anything I could track, because I was sure that there was something else going on. And it was the fact that I kept that sort of symptom diary, which when I then went to my GP for the umpteenth time and said, look, I've been keeping a record of all these things, that was the information that then pointed them in the direction of, we think you're starting your menopause. So I'm really glad I did it, but I wasn't told to do it. So I think you're right about sort of having to be your own advocate and really, know yourself. And if something's not right, you need to speak to your GP or a health practitioner to help you.
I was also wondering about what have work been like, because of course you've got a number of conditions anyway that have impacted on things, and then with the menopause as well, how have they been with that? I mean, I know they've been supportive, but can you give us some examples? I mean, we wouldn't name and shame them. If they'd been bad, we wouldn't have had you on representing BT, would we? But
exactly. I'm very happy to say that my employer have been very supportive. I'm very fortunate that I find myself working already for a company which has got good disability and inclusion and awareness and credentials. I'm glad to say that my work have been very supportive with me, not only through the several years of repeated orthopedic surgeries I had. They were extremely supportive, didn't put me under any pressure, which when you're recovering and not feeling very well, to not have guilt put upon your shoulders is really a very good thing. When I was returning to work after my various surgeries, they gave me a phased return to work, so I could sort of start on reduced hours and work up, because for me, I like to be busy. I don't like to be sat around doing nothing. And as part of your recovery, getting back into your normal routine is really important for your mental health as much as anything. So being able to sort of start back almost part-time when I was well enough to was really helpful to me. And also it meant that the business were actually getting some use out of me, if not full-time initially. And so also I've been very lucky in that I am now able to have a flexible working pattern, which helps and supports me with my health conditions. And it also means that when I'm having flare-ups, when I need to take a bit of a longer break, sometimes a weekend is not quite long enough for me to recover. I have a flexible working pattern now in place, which took a little while to get put into place. There's a process that I had to go through, but I'm pleased to say that it concluded recently very successfully. So that's again another support I have, which means that I'll be able to remain in work and working to the best of my ability, whilst also receiving support from my company. So I'm I'm very mindful that I am lucky to be working for such a supportive employer, and I'm also a member of BT's Able To network, which is our disability network, which is run by employees for employees. It's all done voluntarily. We have two people who are co-chairs, a gentleman called Praveen and a lovely lady called Julia, and I am one of the committee members. There's probably about 15 or 20 of us, so it's not too much of a drain on our day job, but collectively we work together to represent people in our company who are maybe having issues. Sometimes that's because they've been newly diagnosed with something, helping them to sort of work their way through understanding what their new diagnosis might mean for them. Also helping them to understand what workplace adjustments are available for them, helping them to fill in the forms, and giving them the confidence that they can speak to their line manager. And also just in general, just supporting each other, being allies for each other. So I'm very happy to say that I'm in a very supportive company, and being part of the Able To network is my way of sort of putting something back, because the company's been very helpful to me, and I'd like to pay it forwards.
It's great to hear. I mean, it's so important having that support, but particularly having that confidence with, so when we're talking about, you know, like acquired disability, like you say, you got the conditions whilst working, whilst at work, and being able to, and then having those, whether like symptoms changing as well throughout that time, being able to have that confidence to, one, know there's support in place, but two, that you can have those discussions of, oh, actually now this is occurring, there's something else, and by having that like support, I suppose, from your colleagues through the Able network, but then also knowing that the mechanisms are in place with your employer as well must be absolutely vital.
Yeah, it really is. A lot of people within the organisation still sometimes don't understand the support that is available for them. So people like me on the Able To network, we're there to sort of signpost and help them, because our company is huge, and you're not always going to know where every little bit of nugget of information is. So that's where we come in. We also have passports. Some of them are for health, which is one that I have. We have other passports for caring, for example, if you have caring responsibilities. And we encourage people to, with their line manager, work through the passport to declare what their situation is, so that the line manager can really lean in and support them. And it also means that if they move on to a different role within the company, which is often the case because we are a large company, you can take that passport with you. It travels with you, so you don't have to necessarily keep going through chapter and verse with every new line manager you might have. And also sometimes people feel uncomfortable, particularly when it's a new line manager. You might not know that person, and having that very personal conversation can sometimes feel very awkward.
So Linda, it's great to hear about all the positives and all of the great ways you've been supported, but what I just wondered about possibly the other side of that, in terms of, so we know you live with a range of different health conditions, and that can come with its own issues, and just wondered what maybe some of the more challenging or frustrating things are about that. What are the things that sometimes you feel like we'd maybe rather not be talking about, or people sometimes avoid?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, Chris, and it's quite a difficult question to answer. For me, having non-visible disability, people genuinely don't know that there's anything going on with me because it's not seen. So sometimes when I've had to ask for a bit of help with something, or can you say that again, please? Or do you mind if I sit down here on a busy train? People look at you and they're like, what's wrong with you, kind of thing. So sometimes that's quite difficult to navigate, because people do make judgments, and sometimes they're not always the right ones. I have personally found that, oddly enough, when I've been recovering from orthopedic surgeries and I've been in a wheelchair for several months, I've been on crutches, I've been in moon boots, I've had walking stick, I've basically had the whole range, I've received so much instant understanding from people, strangers in the street, but when that sort of visible cue is no longer there, I've still got issues going on. People are not often aware of them. So at work, for example, we have our lanyards, which we wear around our neck, like most people do with our ID passes. And we're encouraged to wear the yellow daffodil one. It's like the sunflower one, which just says that, you know, I've got a disability. And some people are aware of it, and it just makes them think, okay. And that's been nice. Sometimes for me as well, I find it challenging when I think of how I maybe used to do something, and now I can't do it in quite the same way, or not as well, or as quickly. Sometimes that for me is challenging in a personal sort of way, because I sometimes feel frustrated with myself, and that's not on anybody, that's purely on myself. So there is, I can see Lucy nodding there. It's quite a difficult thing to sort of balance and sort of come to terms with. You're constantly trying to sort of almost sort of be as good as everybody else, and sometimes for me that means I have to work an awful lot harder, because I am slower to do things, I process things differently. If you were to see my notebook for work, it's got everything is written down, and people often say, oh my gosh, Linda, you always remember everything. If somebody's wondered what happened 2 months ago, Linda always knows. It's no, I don't. It's just I have to work probably 10 times harder to appear to be holding my own in my workplace, for example. So you know, the analogy of the duck or the swan swimming along, and underneath the little legs are going like Billy-O. That's basically me. So I do feel sometimes I have to work a lot harder and almost be better in order just to be at the same level as everybody else. And that is tiring, emotionally, psychologically, and also physically. And I think sometimes those are things that aren't often talked about. But nonetheless, I think it's important in a podcast like this that we can bring them up.
Yeah, it also makes me think as well, to a certain extent, that actually we can't all perform at our best all the time, because actually sometimes we have to cruise, because otherwise we will burn out and we'll use up all that energy. And actually I don't think we talk about that often enough. You know, we talk about is everyone performing their best? Actually, we can't do that. That's not sustainable.
It's not.
And which is why we need holidays and breaks from it, and why we need just to cruising is not a bad thing. Some of the time, all the time, we need our little peaks and troughs and everything else, but actually all of that stuff's really important. But something you said as well, one of the things I wanted to ask you, looking back, is there anything you would say to your younger self, Linda, maybe in terms of any advice you'd give yourself, if you could say?
That is a really good question too. You've got some good questions, you guys. I think for me it's probably 2 things. The first thing is something which took me a while to understand, and I wish I'd understood it earlier, because I think I would have saved myself a lot of anguish and pain, is that to basically that it's okay to not feel okay about what's happened to you. We're all very much about, you know, oh, it could have been so much worse, and you're still here and you can still do all these things. So, you know, basically put your chin up and carry on, kind of thing. And I do subscribe to that point of view. I think resiliency is extremely important, and you have to be mentally strong, but you also need to allow yourself that time just to grieve or just mourn, even if it's just personally and silently inside, just to say, gosh, I can't, even now it actually makes me quite emotional, just to say I can't do those things in quite that way anymore. I'm a different person now. And you almost have to grieve and say goodbye to how things were. You can't always be looking backwards, because I think that actually stops you from being able to move forward into your new self, your new life. And I have also found that I've developed a better appreciation and an understanding of the things I can do because I've looked backwards and said farewell to the old Linda. Before I did that, I was kind of stuck in the past and not being very happy with how I was now, and almost feeling that life had dealt me a very cruel blow, and I was basically not very happy about it. So I think if I had come to that realization earlier on, that would have spared me quite a lot of mental anguish. And also just to nowadays, I try to live more in the moment, which I guess follows on from what I've just been saying, to be grateful and embrace the now. Try not to also worry too much about the future. And because I find if we do that, sometimes we then get ourselves drawn up into a lot of anxiety, again, about things that we can't control. So I'm trying to be a bit more grounded and in the moment and more grateful for where I now find myself. But it was a little bit of a mental journey, as it were, to get me. It didn't happen overnight.
That grief one is fascinating. Dan and I were going to do another podcast in this series around grief, and that grief around disability, which I think it's a topic I've felt quite passionately about for some time. And I think actually identifying it with that label can help people to understand that you do need to grieve for the life you weren't able to lead. Definitely. And that's okay. It doesn't mean to say you can't be positive about what life will bring you, and it doesn't mean to say positive things don't happen, but actually it is a grief process, and I feel very strongly about that one. So I'm so glad you brought that up, Linda. It really resonates. Dan, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Well, yeah, no, but that really strikes a chord with me, that sort of recognition and acknowledgement that you were talking about there, Linda, but also that going hand in hand with what you were saying earlier, Lucy, around the recognition at times that we have to be, maybe not 100%, because we always talk about work-life balance. Sometimes, the life part is quite often quite testing in other ways as well, whether that's because of our own conditions or someone else's. So finding that balance as well, and realizing that sometimes you have to be a slightly less percentage in the workplace, because otherwise you are completely going to burn out. And I think that comes through acknowledgement as well, sort of acknowledgement of what you can do now, and maybe what you can't. I mean, in a way, that goes same as what you were saying there, Linda, is it that then you start to find either new strengths or strengths that maybe you were ignoring in the past as well.
Definitely,
come to flourish a little bit more.
Couldn't agree with you more there. And it's also really important to pace yourself, which I think is kind of what you've been saying, Chris, isn't it? Again, I wasn't very good at that initially, because before 2009, when Mr. Swine Flu came and found me, I was one of those frenetic, running around at 100-mile-an-hour people. And it did take me a really long time to realize I just can't do that anymore. And also, just because you realize that you have to pace yourself, it's also quite difficult sometimes to, you're both nodding because you know what I'm going to say. I love that. It's difficult sometimes to get other people to understand that you need to pace yourself. So sometimes actually saying to somebody, I can't do it that quickly, or I just need to stop now, for whatever it is, whether it's at work or at home. Family members might be, well, you used to be able to do that, or your boss be like, well, I need that now. You need to be able to have those conversations, I think, pretty early on with people. But again, that doesn't come easily. I think we're very programmed just to say yes to everything, aren't we? And to put up and shut up. But as I've been sort of going through my journey with my various conditions, and I've also gone through some pain management, CBT, which NHS very kindly provided to me. And one of the key things I took away from that was around the whole pacing myself, but also letting other people know that I need to pace myself, and they have to respect that. So I think it's really important what you've brought up.
It's fantastic. Yeah, thank you, Linda. I think we're getting close to time, I'm afraid. But it's been really fantastic to chat to you, Linda. I just wondered if you could share with our listeners where they might be able to find you online, if you're happy to share those details.
I'd be more than happy to. Yeah, thanks so much. So I'm on LinkedIn, which I think most people know what that is and where it is. And I'm just on there as Linda Pike. And it says that I'm a security bid project manager at BT Security. And the picture, I've got my picture on there too, so you'll be able to see me pretty easily. And I'd love to, hook up and speak to anybody who's listening to your podcast who wants to reach out. I'd be more than happy to chat to anybody.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Linda, and sharing. I think it's so important to share these sort of personal lived experiences, and we couldn't do it without such fantastic guests who are so open over some stuff that, you know, genuinely is pretty personal, isn't it? We talk about some things that maybe not fit with the typical mold of what we might think is the perfect employee, but we're all human, and we all do stuff in a slightly different way. So thank you from the heart for sharing that and for covering some topics that are very close to my heart as well, Linda. So thank you ever so much, and we shall be back soon with another episode of our podcast. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening. You can find future episodes on major streaming platforms. Search Business Disability Forum or at businessdisabilityforum.org.uk and search podcasts. You can also watch the series on our YouTube channel. Search for Business Disability Forum. Please do share and leave us a rating. Business Disability Forum is the leading business membership organisation in disability inclusion. We work in partnership with business, government and disabled people to remove barriers to inclusion. businessdisabilityforum.org.uk